Good morning, everyone. We are so excited to have you all with us today here to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the Global Links Initiative. We have people coming in as I speak, so if you're joining us right now, while I kind of give you an overview of what we have planned here today, if you could just tell us in the chat where you're joining us from, because I do see a lot of new names, which is always exciting. So I would love to hear where you all are joining us here today from. So as I said, the webinar today is dedicated to celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the Global Links Initiative, which is such an exciting accomplishment. So naturally, to celebrate it, we also have a very exciting panel of marvelous speakers to share with us the Global Links story from when it was founded 10 years ago to where it is here today and to what we envision for the future of this amazing program. As with all our webinars, the format for today's event is going to be casual and conversational. So you'll hear a conversation among our three panel members, Rick Goings, Eleanor Steele, and Dr. Mary Conway Detuan, who are the three founding members of the team that founded Global Links. And that conversation will be moderated by Commerce Dean Deborah Crown. So to get us started here today, we have our amazing GA, Selena Danvers, who will give us a brief introduction of our speakers before she transitions to Dean Deborah Crown to get us started with the panel conversation. So now I will turn it over to you, Selena.
Thank you, Yasmin. Good morning, everyone. My name is Selena Danvers, and I am an upcoming graduate of Crummer Graduate School of Business, a graduate assistant for the Global Links Initiative, and the communications intern for the World Federation of Youth Clubs. It is my distinct honor to introduce our panel speakers and moderator for this celebratory webinar. First, let's start with Rick Goings. Rick is the chairman and co-founder of the World Federation of Youth Clubs, Knights of the French Legion of Honor, chairman emeritus of Tupperware Brands, humanitarian and philanthropist. In 2020, Rick pledged a significant multi-year donation on behalf of the Rick and Susan Goings Foundation to provide funding to the Global Links Initiative, making the Goings Foundation Global Links' primary financial sponsor. Then we have Eleanor Steele. Eleanor is the special advisor to the Rick and Susan Goings Foundation, previously as vice president and officer at Tupperware Brands. She led the global communications and women's initiatives. In 2011, Eleanor joined Rick Goings on a special assignment in Baghdad to assist Iraqi businesswomen to create sustainable business opportunities. With this goal in mind, they developed the Global Links Initiative. Then we have Dr. Mary Conway Detuan, a Fulbright scholar and George D. and Harriet W. Cornwell chaired professor of international business and social entrepreneurship at Crummer Graduate School of Business. Oh man, we've got to move on real quick. And Dr. Conway is part of the core team that developed the Global Links Initiative, for which she serves as faculty director. And last, we have our wonderful Dean Deborah Crown. She has been supporting the Global Links Initiative since she became Dean of Crummer Graduate School of Business in 2016. Prior to joining Crummer, Dean Crown led an impressive 25-year career in higher education, including 10 years as Dean of the Lucas Graduate School of Business at San Jose State University and Dean of the College of Business at Hawaii Pacific University. Dean Crown's leadership, vision, and global experience are just a few of the reasons why we are grateful to have her and her support of the Global Links Initiative. So with that, Dean Crown, I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Selena, and just such an honor to be here. And I'm loving seeing so many alumni and supporters of the Global Links Initiative just right here joining us this morning. So thank you. And I have the privilege of kind of moderating this morning's discussion, which will also include a question and answer period. So the first question to Rick and to Eleanor, we all want to know and hear the story about what inspired you to found the Global Links Initiative, of which we are all so appreciative.
Eleanor, if you don't mind, I'll jump in, and then you please, as always. Eleanor's, we worked together 25 years at Tupperware, and her job was to make me look smarter than I am. And the work continues, heavy lifting. Anyway, so we had established some kind of credibility at not only the World Economic Forum in Davos, with regard to really fighting and getting in front of the tip of the spear for women's issues, and also at the United Nations, where was deeply involved in their women's initiatives and the creation of a he for she. So it didn't go unnoticed. The Defense Department, we were ending in Iraq the formal hostilities, and I say formal because it still was, there were still rockets going off when we were there. We were kept in safe houses, but it's interesting. For years, Colin Powell has been a friend, and I brought him on the Boys and Girls Club board, and Colin always had a saying that was kind of the Bed Bath and Beyond slogan on breaking things in the store. He said, if you break it, you own it. And what happened in Iraq wasn't very surgical, and the collateral damage to their economy was terrible. And I really think if you really watched it trickle down, it was women and families it mostly impacted. So as far as part of a very small group, what I think, Eleanor, there were 5 of us or 6. Yes. The Defense Department asked us to go there and look into it and give us feedback on what we ought to do. Eleanor, to you.
Okay. So my role in going was really as someone who was working with the women's initiatives, and we had a strong emphasis on developing confidence. And so when Rick asked me if I could go, I was like, if they say yes, I'm there. And I knew from going into it that the women there were trying to develop sustainable businesses, but their businesses were sort of evaporating in front of them because they were based on American contracts, and our people were leaving there. So when we met with these women and that were in business, but also students at the University of Baghdad, we saw this huge need among the women to learn how to become, or how to train others to become entrepreneurs and start their own businesses, because there really were no business opportunities for them. So education and equality had always been important to us, women's empowerment and entrepreneurship. So really it all came together when we were there and saw a need that we could respond to and hopefully provide an answer for.
So that's,
you know what, Dean Crown, what was really, this is one of those hiding in plain sight. We started off by holding these sessions with what would be the equivalent of Selena. They'd be all kind of your peers. They're not as quite as high energy at that point, but years of war. But what we saw is sparkles in their eyes, and they wanted to learn to run their own things, to start their own businesses. And that's what became also the hiding in plain sight. Right. There weren't any faculty there really who had been trained to teach young people how to be in business and how to be especially entrepreneurs, because under Saddam Hussein, it was pretty much a government-controlled economy. So that's where it became clear. Eleanor and I looked at each other and I said, we're going to start something here, put a stick in the ground. And we're going to go back there to the US and get the State Department and look for the right school. I had a natural bias for Crummer because,
Well-
hey, the #1 business school in the state of Florida, I knew they could pivot. And that's where it started.
So that's such an amazing beginning. I have to say, I don't know about the rest of you on the call, but literally gives me goosebumps when I think you saw a need and you found a solution that we love is integrating higher education into that. And Rick, we are grateful for you coming to Rollins and to Crummer with, all right, I'm guessing that at this point there was some discussion, and Mary, I know you at the early stages were even a part of some of that discussion. Tell us a little bit about how you joined this group and what some of the next steps were.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking, Dean. And the first thing is I just want to say joining that group, right? So this is a pretty austere group to join. But I remember when the previous dean called me and he's like, we got this idea, nobody's really flushed through it a lot, but Rick and Eleanor are over in Iraq and they want to know if we'll start a program to do a train the trainer model. And I was like, huh, okay. You got two great people with vision and an idea. I'm on, right? I'm on board. And it's a really great lesson in entrepreneurial thinking and design as you go on the fly. So, right, we teach design thinking. I say we're building the plane and flying the plane and everything at the same time. And that is what we have been doing with Global Links. And the very important thing I think that really got us started, of course, our first Global Link scholar. And if there were more time, I would just tell you the story about the crazy phone call you can imagine getting in Iraq. So we were very grateful. We are still grateful for the Department of State's support in helping us get the word out in Iraq, because as Rick and Eleanor said, this was a very difficult time for the country. But you can imagine just getting a phone call from a professor in a state at an institution that you've never heard of that says, hey, come and join us, right, for a year. And so with all of the scholars' input, and then you've met some of our great graduate assistants, program managers, the exact word that Rick said, we've learned to pivot, and we've pivoted several times and built, improved, of course, made mistakes, repaired, because the core of our values is relationships and building relationships. And so once you have that as a core, it allows you to take risks because there's a super heavy bond of trust. And I think that's really what we have.
So, and I love that you talk about that, is kind of that need to pivot, kind of for all three of you. I'm guessing you might even have different answers to what you think was the most substantial pivot that you needed to make. So I'm going to ask kind of each of you to weigh in and think for a moment. What do you think was the most substantial pivot that helped get to this point today? Rick, you want to go first?
Yes, it was firstly trying to find where we could, there was a need everywhere, clearly, but greater in certain places. But our initial great pivot was Amel. God, she was living in Babylon, and our first requisite was to get her in safe situations where she could remain, she could survive. So we went for, that was bizarre initially. And so what we put on paper with regard to learn and return, she'll go here, then she'll go back, then we'll bring all the students. All we met there back in Iraq was roadblocks, because you really had the sectarian violence still going on. But that's where I've just got to speak to Dr. Conway. I think this is the future, having people and teaching students how to pivot, that the straight line that you think is going to happen doesn't happen. And I always kid people that when somebody gives me some flattering introduction, I say, put that aside. The most important things for me have been my failures, face plants, and flops, because you learn to pivot. That's what gives you that agility. And what I saw Rollins do there, and especially Dr. Conway and Crummer, that was a key.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else?
I have to jump in here and almost go back to Mary for just a second. But I think the stars must have been perfectly aligned when Mary Conway, Dr. Conway came into our lives, and she was the perfect person through all these years to really lead the charge. And I think as a Crummer grad and learning to work in teams for everything we ever did and accomplished, that it's been a real team effort with working directly with Mary, and then of course Yasmin. And you can see from your screen how many others have joined forces with us to be a part of this. And so that wasn't really a pivot to anything new, but it was definitely a big part in the beginning. And as Rick said, you know, we were in a way used to just charging ahead. We get an idea, we'd move ahead and create a program. But this was so special with Global Links that we needed the deep relationships with the State Department. We had a great relationship and deep relationship with Rollins and Crummer. So it gave us great stability to pivot to this broader team. And it also opened doors for expertise that we didn't have, but we needed to be a part of this program.
So I like how you kind of weave that together, because when we talk about live strategy, Rick, and just really the need for adaptation, Eleanor, you're bringing in such a good point that one can't do that if you don't have the support of a full team and an agile team. So we talk about, you know, developing agile individuals, but so important to remember, we also have to develop those agile teams. So Dr. Conway, Dr. An, I know many of the pivots that I've watched you just brilliantly do, but I'm so curious to hear from you directly.
Well, you know, I think not only the pivots in the past, but the pivots that are still to come, right? So like any entrepreneurial organization, we're continually adapting to an environment. And I think the situation that we're in right now with COVID and coming out of COVID is a classic example of that, because the heart of our program, as I said, is based on relationships, and relationships that emerge into very deep one-on-one contact, right? So the scholar comes here and spends time with us and at the Rollins campus, gets to really understand our pedagogy, design, our mission, our heavy integration with the community, both the for-profit, nonprofit, and the students' role in all this development. But when COVID hit and we weren't able to bring someone over to us immediately, right? The team came together and said, all right, what are we going to do to keep folks engaged, right? And again, a great vision from Rick to say, all right, let's go live with some webinars. Let's find out what people want to learn about. Let's feature our change makers, some of whom have joined us. Let's feature our entrepreneurs. Let's feature our graduate assistants, and keep that motivation alive. The other pivot that I think speaks well to what we're doing is the importance of having the support, not only of the scholar, but of the scholar's institution. And in Brazil, and as we move to the rest of the Latin American or the LATAM region, we've really honed in on how to create good institutional connections. So in Brazil right now, we're with ESPM, and that they've started a center on women's entrepreneurship. And the University of Calcutta, our contact in India, is also starting a center on small business development. So we see this grow, but so much of the energy comes from the students, the entrepreneurs, and the scholars. We just move the chess pieces around on the board.
So I love that you just kind of laced in some of the impact as well. So kind of the growth, those circles that continue to grow. So share with all of us kind of some of the themes that you have found to be the most impactful. I know sometimes we can think of those as proud achievements, but I know you all well enough to know if I use the word achievements, you're going to go running into the night. So it's things that have really, you see, have had an impact.
You know, I'll jump in on that first. That Dean Crown, I happen to believe, and I saw this from almost 20 years going to the World Economic Forum in Davos, there was no subject dealing with the incredible power of women and gender parity. And this is one of the achievements, the change in the narrative, because the narrative always has been predominantly in the past social justice. It's just not fair. Well, I buy into that, but the moment you say it's social justice, you make someone a victim, and you don't look at the pure case of the power of women out there. And that's what we started doing, to sit there. And this isn't a question of it's not fair. It's a question of it's dumb. I have a friend, Nick Kristof, one of the great writers of the New York Times, and he and his wife, Cheryl Wudong, wrote a book called Half the Sky. And the concept is women are holding up half the sky. And if I told you the number of times I've done seminars in Muslim countries where I asked her to bring her husband, and we'd have hundreds of them, and I'd do an hour, I don't speak Bahasa, but with simultaneous translation, talking about the differences between men and women and the power of those differences. And if you leverage it, that's why what we're seeing come to life. And first, in Iraq, then in India, and then, now in Brazil. This is powerful stuff. Change the narrative.
Right. That's excellent. Thank you.
Can I share, because what I get excited about is actually watching the trajectory of our students at Crummer, our students in Calcutta, our students in Sao Paulo, Brazil, because I see how being involved with this program is building them to be more responsible leaders, right? More globally aware leaders, and they're taking that to enable themselves to get better jobs and to continue to think about the impact that they make as consumers and as business, whether they're business owners or somehow involved in that. And so I think whether I look at the incredible graduate assistants that we have, and I know, Rick, when you watched the webinar where we featured those graduate assistants, you can't resist the energy there. And we have some of our change makers from India who are working for PwC, who are creating new outlets, even in Brazil, our most recent. So that, for me, that's the most impact. I can give you numbers, right? But I think as President Grant Cornwell said in his webinar, it's really about the deep life-changing connections that this program makes, and the fact that we are still in touch with everyone who has been in Global Links is it just warms my heart, even in this difficult time of COVID.
And I want to say that these students that become involved, the students and that become the change makers, they are spending hours and hours of their own time. It's all volunteer. They don't get a grade for it. They don't get credit for it. They're not getting paid. So they are doing this because they want to learn. They have this hunger for knowledge and for learning to do something that will help them in the long run, the long term, for their role in this world. And I will never forget one of the first seminars that we did, Mary, in conjunction with the U.S. consulate that was there in Calcutta, or is there in Calcutta. And at the very end of the program, all of a sudden, all of the students, the scholars, the change makers came to the front, right in front of the camera, because they knew that I was on. And so they were all waving at me and throwing kisses and hugs. And I was too, of course. But it was so heartwarming. It's one of those moments that you will never, ever forget.
And I think it is one of the things that we hear repeatedly, these lifelong relationships, the depth of those relationships and how they've taken, Rick, I'm going to use your language, kind of that power and spread it throughout their communities, shared it with us most definitely. And Mary knows that's one of my favorite things, is being able to have those exchanges with the student. So I'm curious, because oftentimes when we think of public-private partnerships, and this one is so unique, so I love that it has kind of the corporate, education, nonprofit partners, we've got the state involved, and still you're managing to pull off these high touch, because I think when you think of public-private partnerships, we don't often think of high touch. How do you think, what is the magic? How have you been able to do that? And what are some of the challenges in doing that? Just kind of for other people on this call that might be thinking along the same lines, how do we partner in this way?
Rick,
Well,
yeah. No,
you know,
you.
I have a friend that taught at Columbia, and he's retired now, but he talked about the great forces that are going to change in the new millennium. And one of the major issues are most governments just don't have resources anymore. And we have to figure out a realignment of resources, not only money, but the investment of human capital on how you take care of civilization moving forward. And there's no other choice. And that's why we've got to, you know, we need, for those countries that have had great capitalism, it needs to be rethought. The gap between have and have not is going to be ridiculous right now. And so what I love is when you see people in government, people in higher education and in business come together voluntarily and say, let's create some construct. And when you see things like this and it gains traction, you know, for me, it gives me hope in civilization and the road ahead.
Excellent, excellent. I think Selena's opening for us, those of you that did not see, kind of joy in some of our graduate assistants. And Rick, I think that firsthand joy that people get to see as a part of this program often goes unheralded. So I like that you're really talking about that volunteer contribution. So Eleanor, how about for you? I know you had some thoughts on that as well.
Thank you. Yes, it was, you know, it was a great day when we went to Washington, D.C. the first time to pitch our program. It was very lean in an outline, to the ambassador for global women's issues at the U.S. Department of State. And Rollins was represented, and I was there, and Department of Defense as well came. And she brought in some of her colleagues to hear. And when we finished presenting the global links as it was going to exist in those early days, they were like quiet for a moment, and we were kind of concerned about the quiet. And then they said, we can't believe this. Most people walk in and say, we need money and we'd like to do this, but what are you going to do for us? And they said, this is the first time anyone has ever come into our department and brought a fully, you know, a program, an outline for it, where we were going to go, what we were going to do with this program. And I remember Rick asked me, he goes, so how did they respond? And I said, probably to say they were dancing on the table would be an understatement. So we've made great friends at the State Department through the years and have had great relationships. And as Mary said, they have helped us when we needed an intermediary to help us get visas for scholars and students. And so we continue to build on those relationships, but it was an inspiring moment.
You know, Deborah, if I go back to your question about like keeping these deep relationships, I again have to go back to any organization that wants to do that has to understand what their values are. And our first two, and our team went through this exercise of creating our values, and we actually borrowed from one of our Crummer alums, Dan Cockrell's book about not only have values, but prioritize your values and understand that the first decision and the first value that we have is actually empathy. And the second is community building. And through those two things is where the empowerment comes from. Because even though we're running stuff, many of the activities from here at Rollins in Winter Park, Florida, we defer to the experts, our scholars in India, our scholars and their support team in Brazil to say, this is the idea we have. Is it going to work? How do we meld it? And by involving them from the beginning, rather than coming to them with a canned program, the energy it just grows and grows and grows. So I think that's really important in keeping those relationships deep and in understanding that that is our priority. We can grow and we will grow and we are growing, but not at the risk of losing that foundation.
Such
Something plays into this too that I think is unique to not only the relationships that we developed at State Department. Milan Bavir, the first woman's ambassador, became and is a dear friend, and we've done things together all over the world. But more importantly, when you pick the schools, higher education isn't known as being very gazelle-like. And often the larger school you have, the more difficult it is. Pivot is not part of the program. Entrenchment. Rollins has been so gazelle-like because you wouldn't have thought a school of the size of Rollins would have the international interest, but it has and does. And the power of that focus and the ability to get their resources behind it has been critical. And that's where Mary, I mean, so many people there think there's so many more people working at global lengths. And by the way, that's the sign of a great and efficient organization where you didn't need the masses. It's an empowered group of people. Now you've picked, second country you picked is 1.4 billion people. And we've got repeater stations. And I looked through the list of our scholars. Sharmista Rumpa, I mean, they're fabulous. And what you really want to do is create repeater stations. I've always said in business, you want to design it, you want to launch it in Learning Laboratory. Third, you want to refine it or actually fix it. And then lastly, you want to scale it. The key to scaling this is these repeater stations. And I got to tell you, Dr. Conway, the people that you have picked out there or who picked us, this is an incredible repeater station. And now, Brazil is the 5th largest population in the world, 250 million people, and it's just starting.
What good language to talk about repeater stations. And one of the things I just want to say, so we have people live on today's call, which we'll go to Q&A in just a moment. But one of the things that I love about these sessions is that we've found so many people are watching later. And so just because I think that really is something that we're learning. So from a repeater station perspective, I'm going to ask, so we've thought of that from a country perspective, and also I'm struck, Rick, that the whole model is based on that repeater station for the individuals, training individuals to train others, training students who we now have the privilege of seeing 10 years later and all of the people that they have touched in their community. I mean, I love that, the concept of the repeater station in this work. As we look forward in the next, so we're celebrating an amazing 10 years, and for everyone, see so many people on this call who've just been such an instrumental part of this. What are the three of you really, when you're looking at the next 3 to 5 years? What does it look like? How many more repeater stations or repeater individuals? What does this look like moving forward for you? And I have my own thoughts too. I will share.
Can I start with this, Rick? Would that be okay?
Sure.
Because what I think is interesting about this, and again, it speaks to one of our principles, that great ideas come from everywhere. And Rick was so open to our team in saying, look, we want to be sure this continues. We believe in the work. We believe in the ripple effect that training the trainer models have. So he challenged Yasmin as a program manager, and I said, so think about Latin America and put together a proposal. Like, it was that open-ended, right? And again, it was that entrepreneurial. And so we sat down and we recognized from working with India that having 2 years in one place and focusing, right, our international expansion strategy, not in all of India, but in Calcutta, and building those deep relationships with the consulate general there. And at that time it was Craig Hall, having the scholars gain traction in their own space. So 2 years there before we add another country, right? So the plan that Yasmin, and I always start with her name first, right? Because she's doing a lot of that work behind the scenes. Yasmin and I put together was another cycle in Brazil. And of course, we have our scholar for 2021, Marielsa Cavalieri, who's also from ESPM. Then we look to Mexico, where Crummer has very deep relationships with several institutions and good connections with the business community. 2 years of cycle there. And the idea is, which is very much evident in India right now, is when you get that base and that proof of concept, other funders come in and other supporters come in. And we've seen that with federal grants in Calcutta. We've seen it with university support, right, through those centers. And then from Mexico to look to Colombia and establish those relationships there. So that's really the proposal that we sent to Rick. And so far, so good, right? Even the pivot around COVID, so far, so good.
Dean Crown, can I add something to this? This is back to, we're not gonna solve all the issues here, but let me tell you the template I look at. I keep this on my iPhone. So we've got 7.5 billion people in the world. About half are women. The bulk of those women are not going to get the benefit like you, Selena, and to go to graduate business school. Most will never get to college. And there are those that, will only have certain levels of primary. And we're talking well over half the women in the world. So why the importance of entrepreneurship is, because I hear all this, I buy into all the STEM, but when I'm in South Africa, I tell them the cavalry is not coming, okay? We need to find a way to empower women so that they can add to their, not only the economy, but their self-worth by engaging them in activities. And the thing I keep on my iPhone is they may not have a business school degree, but these are I always keep this on this qualities not measured by cognitive tests. Would you hire somebody that had these? Reliability, persistence, enthusiasm, courage, passion, discipline, compassion, and motivation. I mean, that's it. And Mista, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking of, wow, all the women that you touch out there, that some habits, but that they don't have the education piece, but they have all of this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why don't we engage these women rather than say, we've got 80 more years to go till we cycle through the group that can have STEM certification?
So, and I'm going to come back, Rick, to something that you said kind of as we were discussing the setup for this, was that you see "and" as such an important word. And I love that. And I told you, there we go. And I told you I was going to be repeating that. And I think that really, I want Eleanor and Dr. Conway Dutta on to kind of talk a little bit more. So Rick is talking about the things for all of the touch points and empowering women. So what are some of the other and pieces that are a part of Global Links? Because I personally love that we blend education and are able to touch people. I love, and you set the stage for that, Rick, at the last meeting. What are some of the and pieces before we open this up to the audience, just that you want to make sure that we cover today? Because there's so many facets of Global Links Initiative.
There really are. And a lot of those have been, spawned from the original. And I want to highlight some of the accomplishments in India, in Calcutta, because they are part of the ands. It started just with, Global Links and Dr. Sharmista Banerjee, and then Dr. Rumpa Chakraborty, who came on board, and their students who have become incredible change makers for changing, the way they see the world and what they want to accomplish. And so now in Calcutta, these students themselves have gone to the next level with starting a global impact investment fund for women. And then also the other program that they started is the Chain for Change. So they are taking their learnings from the beginning and creating the ands, these new platforms that they're expanding to, and it's all wrapped in together, but they're not the original, they are the ands. And so I look forward to, and maybe Mary can share too, but what's also taking place in Brazil with the students, because they are sort of the engine that's keeping this going.
Oh yes, yeah. You reminded me, Eleanor, of two things that I want to say. One is the and is, and we learn from them. So by that I mean, when we show a little faith in students who have been sitting in a classroom in a very passive situation for many years, and we say, what do you think? And then we say, no, really, what do you think? What should we do? What should we do here? What would you do? Okay, go out in the field and do it. And we learn from them. So the big and is that the circle of learning, right, is where the empowerment comes from. And the respect, right, that we have, again, one of our values, the respect that we have that everyone who comes on the team has something to contribute. The entrepreneurs teach us about persistence above and beyond anything we will ever really experience one-to-one, but by living along with them on their journey, we learn that, and we hope to emulate it. So my big end is, and what are you learning back? And how are you multiplying that learning out?
That's I think a great segue into from our audience, as kind of speaking of pivoting, which element in this was the most challenging to manage as a result of the pandemic? Building when we weren't able to bring people physically into our community because of COVID.
Yeah, so for me, and I welcome Yasmin to unmute herself if she wants to add to this. I think it's building a new relationship. So we have a new scholar with Marielsa, but also maintaining the motivation and the energy, right? Because life is going on at the same time. So our Global Links change makers from Brazil, right? All six of them, incredibly amazing. We said, okay, we'll see you in April of 2020. And then we said, okay, we'll see you in August of 2020. And now we're like, okay, we'll see you in August of 2021. And how do we let them know that please have some faith in us? Like, please understand that it is not from a lack of want, right? And so how do you keep that communication going and that interest? Because their lives are going on. So we even spoke to the students and said, look, as you go out in your employment, whether that's internship or employees, please tell your employer, both in your interview hired, that this is an honor that you have received and you have worked really hard for it, and you want to take that reward of coming to Rollins and learning about, and that you will be able to leverage that learning back to your education. So just keeping that motivation going. But look, we've got some amazing scholars. If you've met Denise Delboni, you are not worried about keeping anyone motivated, because that woman has energy multiplied.
That is excellent. Thank you. And I see sort of, Mark, you've put something into the chat about just kind of looking at that and conversation, and really you're asking, considering formal opportunities to leverage or tap into the students in a formal way, is this part of the pivot? And I think all of you can speak to that, because some of that, it's happening now. It's clearly happening in those ripples. Is there anything else that, this is Yasmin, this is to kind of all of our graduate assistants, Dr. Conway-Detta on as well. Anything else that's kind of being considered?
I have two examples, if I can. Sorry, Rick, Eleanor, may I? I get excited when we. One is, and this is an idea that came from our most recent graduate assistant, Ilea and Selena, when they were talking. And so I'm like calling out to Renee Quintanilla to watch This Is Coming. And one of our previous graduate assistants, Michelle Hernandez, said, look, the amount of work that we do as graduate assistants deserves recognition beyond the graduate assistantship. This really is an internship. And if I really start to document all my hours and the work that I do and the contribution that I've made, because if you're looking at our website, if you're looking at our Facebook, our LinkedIn, that is Selena, Ilea, Juliana, right? That is their work. And so making it a more formalized internship, Mark, I think is one of the ways we're doing it. A second way, and thanks to the collaboration, because this was another pivot we had to make, through the Chain of Change grant that Eleanor mentioned, we had a plan to travel with Crummer students to India to leverage the knowledge and share directly to the students, because we haven't had a chance to bring the students over yet. And because of COVID and some pushing back of timelines, we lost that opportunity of window for the Crummer students. Selena, we're going to get you there. Don't have faith, have faith. But so what we did is pivoted to the CLA classes. And we said, let's make this part of the community engagement courses that CLA has, and let's incorporate it into Professor Josie Balsack's class on social change making. So now we're connecting 20 of our undergraduate students with 20 of the students from Calcutta. Dr. Banerjee can correct me on the names. It's Calcutta, Assam, and Tezpur, right? That who are connecting directly with that. And that is, it will be, mark my words, it will be an official class in the Crummer curriculum moving forward with Brazil and Latin America. So thanks for asking that.
So thank you. And actually, President Cornwell, who is on this call, Yasmin, can you do me a favor and unmute him? Because we want him to kind of join in a bit into this conversation. He's had such an important role. And Rick, when you talked about earlier, for a university, oftentimes who is not thought of as agile, and Rollins and our president are kind of such a wonderful example of agility and a commitment to global learning and making sure that we're having an impact. So Grant, if I can, I think that should have bought you some time to be unmuted. Yes.
I think I am.
Wonderful.
Let me first say that it's so good to, I could listen to you tell the stories of Global Links all day long. So all of you panelists, thank you for the inspiration of just hearing the story again. I just wanted to chime in and say that, I've been at Rollins for 6 years now, so I wasn't here at the beginning of Global Links, but once I took office and heard about it and came to understand its genesis and structure, My response is, I've come to the right place. Because this is the kind of place where my values and vision completely coincide with the good work already being done on the ground. And my comment is this: at Rollins, we talk about our education, our whole mission, our whole purpose being to educate students for global citizenship. And we strive to enable them to learn how to put their education to work in the world. And Global Links is exactly that made manifest. And the reason that that is so important is, you know, on campus here in academic learning, we can teach the theory and the history and the analytics and provide them with a tremendous toolkit. But it's then up to each and every one of our students to go out and make a difference in the world, equipped as they are with their education. What Global Links does is it puts the whole Rollins educational community in touch with practitioners of global citizenship. And that is where the real deep learning takes place. So I am sure it's the right model. It has my complete support, and I just wanted to chime in and say thank you all again for this panel, but especially for the program itself.
Hear, hear. Thank you for that. And as you know, within Crummer, we're so appreciative of your continued support. President Cornwell, and we love this program within Crummer. When you talk about business education, when you talk about entrepreneurship and really making sure that people understand that model. So I second that, and we absolutely love this. And I know, Dr. Banerjee, can you share with us, so you're just someone on this call we would love to hear from as well, whether it's a favorite moment or a piece of advice for our movement forward.
Hey, wait a moment, Dr. Banerjee. I've got to ask, I've been many times to India, but is that your house behind you? Because because you sure live better than I do.
This is my university, and I'll surely take you there for a walk and a cup of coffee when you're visiting Calcutta.
Oh, I would love it.
Thank you, Dean Crown, for asking for my favorite memory. There are so many. I should have saved them before, but I really want to share with you something which also touches Rollins. I want to explain the context. The American High Commissioner, the American Consulate, is a very important person in the city of Calcutta. And the consulate's house is a road where no cars and no human beings are allowed to walk down. So it's that high profile. Mm. And Global Links became such a name that the Consulate General, Dr. Craig Hall, invited us over to that specific house, which is the White House of Calcutta. And we were invited and told we had the opportunity to tell him about our entrepreneurs. So that was so exciting. And then cut to 2017. And here comes Dr. Craig Hall with his mother and his wife visiting Rollins College to meet our phase 3 students, the change makers. And he stays there for a long time. And we didn't know what to do with him because we were next to go to President Grant's house. So, and he walked along with us, the Consul General, who we cannot even see from behind the window. We can only see him on television. So he walked along with us, had dinner with us. So everything that can happen in the life of a Calcutta city girl happened to me in Rollins College. So that was really a wonderful thing.
That is wonderful.
Thank you so much, Mr. Goings, Eleanor, and Mary, for making it all possible for us, our change makers, and our entrepreneurs.
That is excellent. Well, I think we have time for kind of one last So Rick, I'm going to turn back to you before I have to hand this back to Yasmin to kind of close us out. But I'm curious, Rick, after kind of you and Eleanor really pulled this together from the beginning, is it even possible for you to have a favorite memory? Are there just too many that are competing?
Well, they're competing because they're competing with, it would signal, do I have greater feeling of respect and affection from one of our leaders than others? And you've got, you love them all the same. No, it is just, but that we've been able to endure through 10 years of this. And what I want you to get the feeling of too is back to this repeater station, because we're dealing with so many different time zones in the world, we have to do these kinds of things. And we're learning actually how to become better at it. And I believe that's going to be a change in not only the business world, but in higher education in the future, how we use the and of this. But the repeater station, before it's all over, thousands will see what we talk about today, and this will have an incredible half-life to it. But that's why we have to keep investing in doing these. And for those of us that, Shamisa, I so much appreciate it. It's late at night there, and it's very difficult, particularly when I used to live in Hong Kong. Every week I had to sign in from my calls to New York City with the board. It's really difficult, but we're finding a way in all these different time zones to connect to people. And I do believe that's going to be the power of it, because right now, Dr. Banerjee, she has, well, what was his name? He wrote Zorba the Greek, Nikos Konstantzakis. He said, yeah, don't give me friends and don't seek friends. Seek soldiers in arms, where you're really comrade in arms working together. Sharmista, I know you've got now those of us all over the world who are part of this network that you are there creating in India and elsewhere. That's the way we've got to think about it, is plant these seeds there, find the right kind of leaders and the right kind of scholars, support them and connect them. And that's how this grows.
So thank you. I love that. And if I could just kind of welcome, if you're not watching this live and you're seeing this later, please know that we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. Connect with us. We want to hear from you directly. So just because your time zone might be different, and so it doesn't matter when you're watching this, please reach out and become a part of the Global Links Initiative. So Yasmin?
Thank you so much, Dean Crown. This was just so incredible and inspiring to listen to. And to go off of what Dean Crown just said, I actually did post all of our different social media accounts. So I encourage you all, whether you're on the call or watching later, to follow us on our social media. We always love to hear feedback from everyone, ideas. So we always welcome that input. Thank you to all our panel speakers, and thank you to Dean Crown for moderating this conversation. This was just incredible, and we love to end all our webinars with my favorite part always, which is our little group photo. So I will ask one of our GAs to take the group photo, and then in the meantime, if you could all just, if you don't already, just turn on your cameras. We would love to have you all in our little virtual group photo. It makes us feel like we were here in person, and so we can actually be together in person and return to real group photos. So I will ask
Yasmin,
yes.
as we're preparing for that group photo, I just have to give a call out to someone who joined us here, Rodrigo from ESPM in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So wow, great time, Rodrigo. Great to see you. Thank you.
Hey, Selena, if you want to dance again, it would add value to the. That's how you started before everybody got on. She got formal.
Oh, I already prepared the music for everyone.
Perfect.
We've got our
Yeah.
change makers. This is my favorite part too, Yasmin, because look, Shomita, Shudita, Ria. This is where we get to see all the folks that we haven't seen for a while. So we love this part.
Oh, this is great.
All right. So Leah will let us know when she's ready, when she's taking the photo, so we can all smile really big.
Okay. I'll count to 3. Everyone say global links. All right. 1, 2, 3.
Global links.
All right. I'm all set. Thank you, everyone.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you all so much again. This was just so wonderful, and we look forward to engaging with you all on our social media, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you again.
Thank you.
Call out to
Thank
Jane
you.
Hirsch too. Hey, Jane, good to see you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you
guys.
all.
Bye. Where's your music? There it is.
Just